Hey, this is Sean with the Prepared Homestead. I want to talk to you today about starting seeds. And even though we're outside, we're going to talk about starting seeds indoors. So whether you're going to put them under grow lights or you're going to put them in a sunny window, doesn't really matter. What we're talking about today is just real basic seed starting. So we're going to talk about some of the good factors that are required for plant growth, and then just some of the basics on how you would go about starting seeds. Okay, so let's get started. The very cool thing about starting plants from seed is that it doesn't take a lot of resources or effort or money to get started. You can start very simply. Here I've got one tray. In this case, I've got 6 different seed packets and some water and obviously I've pre-done the soil in this tray. But it doesn't take a lot, so you should just get started. And if you're not sure, you watch some basic videos like this and just try it. I mean, that's the best way, is to experiment and see how it goes. Now, these seed packets will tell you a lot of information that's very useful. So let's look at this, for example. In this case, we've got borage. It's going to tell you when to direct sow, or if you want to start it indoors, it says 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost. Okay, so if your last frost, let's say for example your last frost is June 1st, okay, in general, if it's June 1st, well then if I back that up 4 to 6 weeks, when you can start. So you would, in the middle of April, mid to late April basically is when you would want to start that from seed. And then there's all kinds of other information where it tells you the depth, whether this is manual or perennial, days to germination, 7 to 14 days, what height it will get when it is a mature plant, what is it like, sunshade, this likes full sun. It says thin to 12 to 15 inches apart, okay, and planting depth, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so that's a lot of good information. What I really like about borage in particular is that it stays flowering for a long time. Here it says in the blooms it says summer, but I found that it flowers a long time. It's one of the early flowers that come on, early summer, and it stays till late summer. So it stays for quite a long time. The flowers are edible, the leaves are edible. It's a good companion plant because it attracts pollinators, etc. Okay, so anyway, let's talk about basic seed starting. Let's talk about some organizational tips. An important thing to consider when starting seeds is, how do I keep all these organized? How do I, I've got 6 different plants that I'm going to be growing here from seed. How do I make sure that they don't get mixed up? And there's a lot of different ways to do this, and depending on how many plants you have, like for example, if you're just doing one tray like this, you could probably use the popsicle stick method or anything like that. And that's totally fine, where you just write the plant that's on the popsicle stick, for example, and put it in each cell. We don't do that because we end up growing a lot of trays like this, and so we use a numbering system. And so with these, these black plastic trays, you got to have something that will be able to write on the black tray itself. And we like to basically number the rows. Okay, so again, if we're starting like 8 or 10 trays, so we grow quite a lot from seed. But at the same time, we're not growing an incredible amount. We're not doing a commercial scale. This is kind of homestead scale. So for example, I'm going to write on here I'm going to show you real quick how we do it. I'll just do this quick. And I like to just go one number per row. And even though I might take up 2 rows with one plant, it doesn't matter. This is how I do it. And this is based on the fact that we have a lot of other trays going right now. Okay, so as you can see, well, maybe you can't, I'll show you. Okay, so these numbers, each row has its own number. And now, as I plant into here, I know that I have a corresponding spreadsheet that for all these numbers and all these plants. And if I want to look and go, hey, what was 42 again? And I look and I go, okay, yeah, that's borage. The next thing you need to know is when you put in your soil, you want that soil, and you don't want it compacted, but you do want it tamped down, okay? So you want it to be tamped, like I said, where it's not going to go all the way where you push it down and it's going to be depressed, you know, an inch or so. You want it a little bit tamped. Okay, now as far as planting depth, again, all seeds are a little bit different, but generally speaking, the smaller the seed, the less that it needs in depth. Now, that's a big generalization because some plants require sunlight to be able to germinate. Other plants really don't. It's not part of the process. They might need moisture. And in this case, we're talking mostly about vegetables and flowers and things. So we're not talking about a lot of stratification requirements where you got to put it in the refrigerator for 2 or 3 months, or scarifying it, put it in hot water, all those types of things. Most of these plants don't require that. Okay, now, so as far as planting depth is concerned, you want to take a look at each plant and then follow the guidelines. But in general, usually 1/4 inch or so is pretty common among most vegetables until you get into your bigger seeds, like your squash seeds or your beans and things, and that's going to be more like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so the bigger the seed, the more depth that it needs. But in general, another good little trick is you can take a pencil eraser and kind of just use that. So if we look at this, we can just go through real quick. And again, we're kind of small scale, homestead scale, so we don't have all these extra tools and things that, you know, where you would make all the holes at the same time in all these trays. That's more for market gardeners, commercial people. It's just really not necessary when you're talking home scale, where you're doing, say, 1 to 6 trays of plants. All right, so we're ready to go here. I've got all my holes punched through. I've got my numbering system labeled. I know what plants are going to correspond to what, and that'll eventually go into my main spreadsheet with the other trays and all the other plants. And I've got my seeds all set up and ready to go, and so now let's get planting some seeds. Okay, so all we do now then is, if you have plenty of seed, what I like to do is put 2 or 3 seeds per hole. And if you don't, I mean, if you're pretty confident on the germination rate, you can go, oop, that's too many. But you can do 1 if you wanted to, but to me, I'd rather go more than that. And in this case, I'm taking, each plant is taking 2 rows. That's it. Now we want to keep our trays moist. But I'm here. What I don't want to do is get a watering can and dump a bunch of water on this, because a lot of times the seeds will end up floating to the top and you'll get all messed up and seeds will go astray. Okay, so what I do until I get germination is I will just do water like this. That's basically what I do. Each day I go in and mist it like this. And now what we'll do is we'll get these, once we get them all moistened up and looking good, I'll get them under lights and show you that. All right, so now I put this tray under these lights. Now I didn't need to put these under the lights right now. If I had a heating mat, I could have just put it on a heating mat, and that's fine. But I'm basically putting under the lights to provide the temperature required to get germination going. I did put the top on. I usually keep these little kind of greenhouse tops on to keep the humidity up in that tray up until the time where I start getting germination, and then they come off. And that's it. That's the basics of seed starting. It's very simple. You should get started and just give it a shot. It's not hard. It's real simple to do, and it's a great way to get your feet wet and into growing plants.